Webster is a professional dementia care educator and consultant with lived experience as a family caregiver. She is the founder and president of Caregiver Crosswalk, Inc., and the founder and ambassador of the McGill University Dementia Education Program. Claire's going to talk to us about a very important aspect, is caregiver burnout, and she has a lot of personal experience, so she knows what she's talking about.
So as Ruth mentioned, I unfortunately had experience with this illness. I've been doing this work both personally and professionally for close to 20 years now. I was a caregiver to my late mother who had Alzheimer's disease, who passed away in 2016, and I've recently become a caregiver to one of my closest friends in the world who is only 62 and has been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. So I represented what we call the sandwich generation caregivers. I started this journey in my late 30s. I knew absolutely nothing about dementia. And, as many women, we take on this role of trying to be the best mother, best wife, best friend. Caregiver burnout, it can become a real reality when you're dealing with this type of illness. Thank goodness my family and I survived the journey. This is a disease that doesn't just happen to the person that's diagnosed, it really happens to the family. So it really had a ripple effect, not only on my mother, but it had a ripple effect on our family as well. So providing care to a person living with dementia, as many of you may or may not know, it requires a tremendous amount of patience. It requires creativity and a lot of empathy. And because it's a disease that is ever evolving, what works today is not going to work in 6 months, and what works in 6 months is not going to work a year later. So you have to always be in a state of adapting. So as I mentioned, it has a ripple effect, right? So the person, and the information that I'm sharing today could also apply to people that are caring with other illnesses. It doesn't only have to apply to dementia, because when you're a caregiver, you could be a caregiver to a young child, you could be a caregiver to somebody who has other types of illnesses, but it really has this ripple effect. But when we talk about dementia, you've got the person living with the illness, but then this disease kind of has these tentacles all over the place, right? Because it impacts the caregiver, it impacts my family. If you're a sandwich generation caregiver, you're still working. It's one of the most expensive diseases to manage financially. It has an impact on our healthcare system. So it really has a lot of impact on different areas. So as the disease progresses, one of the most important roles that a family member has to have is that of being an advocate. Because as the disease evolves, the person themselves will lose their ability to use their insight, to lose their judgment. They lose their communication skills. Their vocabulary disappears. Their ability to express their emotions and their needs disappears. So that creates an important role for a family member, that is of being an advocate, right? We become the voice of that person. And while it is a very big responsibility, it also causes a tremendous amount of stress and pressure on us, right? Because we could be doubting ourselves. Are we making those right decisions? Next slide. So the only way to get through this particular illness is through knowledge and education. There is no cure. Once you're diagnosed, there is no cure. Okay, so you have to be one step ahead at all times. You have to understand the evolution of the disease, and you have to understand the very important resources in the community that are there to support you, whether that be for-profit resources or not-for-profit resources. But to avoid the stress, you have to be one step ahead of the disease at all times. Okay, it's about knowledge. Next slide. So some of the most frequently asked questions that people have regarding this illness are, what are the signs and symptoms? Because dementia doesn't necessarily mean only memory loss. It could start with a significant change in personality, okay? Why bother getting a diagnosis if there's no cure? Well, there's many reasons why it's important to have a healthcare professional involved, especially if you have to eventually get a legal mandate or you have to take over the health concerns of the person. How do you get a diagnosis? There's not one clear pathway. Sometimes a family doctor will do a diagnosis. Sometimes they'll refer you to a geriatrician or a neurologist. Sometimes you'll see a neuropsychiatrist, right? There's no one clear pathway. And then, the disease does present a lot of challenging behaviors. So how do we deal with that? What are the safety concerns? What type of leisure and recreation activities could stimulate a person, right? And how do we access those important services in the community? What's the role of a CLSC? How do I get into a CHSLD? What are those tax credits, right? And then the other question that people have is like, how to recognize your own boundaries, right? How do I know my own limitations, when I can no longer care for a person, or how do I know when I'm gonna, what are the signs of burnout? Next slide, please. So the only prescription of care that my mother and I received was good luck, okay? So imagine being diagnosed with cancer or heart disease and all the doctor says to you is good luck. That's what happened. And those were the words that put me on this path to become this caregiver advocate and to really focus on education. Because that's what we got. And that was in 2006. And sadly, this is still going on. This is not a Quebec problem, and it's not a Canadian problem. It's a global problem. This is happening all around the world, okay? So I'm just gonna show you some images, because if you're not familiar with dementia, people don't necessarily know what it looks like. And what's hard for families is at the beginning, the person still looks really good, right? Because the disease is happening inside the brain. So I was an only child. My father had passed away in 2005. And the picture with my mom and I at my wedding, that's when she was just starting to notice some changes in herself. So this is when she was diagnosed. So the disease is divided into 3 stages. We have early, middle, and late. So this is the early stage, where this is where it's really having an impact on her cognition. Her behavior is changing. You can see how young my children were. She was using words like "you're stupid," "shut up." She was getting very overwhelmed by too much stimulation, okay? So this is the middle stage. So at this stage, she can no longer live at home alone. And you can see the changes, just especially in her eyes, how she's looking, right? And how it's having now a physical impact. A lot of people can't imagine when they first get the diagnosis, the physical implications of the illness, right? How it changes their ability to perform their activities of daily living. So this is the last stage. So dementia, the late stage of dementia is not like late stage cancer, we're talking a few months. This is years, okay? So at this stage, she needs full-time, round-the-clock care. And what happens to families at this point is that it causes a tremendous amount of grief. We call it ambiguous loss or anticipatory grief, because you're constantly mourning the person, you're mourning all the losses, right? So this was a 10-year period for me. And this was just a couple of months before she passed away. I had to also make the difficult decision that, my kids, it was difficult for them to come to the long-term care. A lot of times families ask me, should we bring the grandkids, should we bring our children? It really depends, but for my daughters, it was quite difficult to be there. So what are the challenges that family members face with this disease? And there are numerous challenges. The first one is called anosognosia. Okay, it took me a long time to be able to pronounce that word. What that means is that I would say more than 60% of people who are showing signs of dementia are not aware that anything is wrong. Okay? They don't believe that they feel they're fine, and it's just the family members that are accusing them of other things. It causes conspiracy theories. It could cause a person to believe that somebody's stealing from them, cheating on them, that, oh, you're trying to put me away, you stole this, you stole that. Right? And then you say, my God, I'm seeing all these changes. I want to bring the person to see a doctor, but they think there's nothing wrong with themselves. Okay? So this is very common, right? But it's also very difficult because family members, you can't take anything personally. And it causes so much stress because there's all these false accusations and false beliefs that are happening. So I'll give you an example of the cat. So oftentimes the seeds of dementia are planted years before a person is diagnosed. So once upon a time when my son was very young, this is a few years before my mother was diagnosed, I had a cat named Bunny. And my husband at the time and I went away for the weekend, brought my cat and my son to my mom because she loved to babysit my son. Come back after a couple of days and I get my son and I said, where's the cat? And she says, the cat is dead. And I said, what do you mean the cat is dead? She says, well, the cat was scratching the wallpaper. Your father was getting very upset. So I put the cat down. Okay? Now imagine how traumatic that experience was. The cat was only 4 years old. But I'm telling this story because oftentimes when I meet with families, there is always a moment where you went, aha, that's when it began. Okay? With men, it often starts with unfortunate financial decisions, business decisions. But I remember a couple of years ago, going, that's when it began. Okay? It's an event, a situation that was so unbelievably crazy, and you're going, that's when it began. Okay? It can also cause, and not with everybody, but imagine because as the disease is evolving and the person is losing their ability to use their words and communicate and share their needs, it can start to cause a lot of agitation, right? You're frustrated. Imagine you can't tell somebody you have a stomach ache, you've got pain, so you start to become agitated. Some people, it could cause them to, as I said before, those false beliefs. What happens though is that when the family doesn't realize that you can't take it personally, they start to now argue with their husband, wife, mother, father. You start to get into these like frustrations, arguments, right? But the person themselves really believes what they believe. And if you push them too hard, that's when you can start to see some physical aggression coming, okay? They get frustrated, they can throw their glasses, throw their remote control, throw their phone, right? So when I'm working with families, I'm trying to look for, is there verbal aggression? Has the verbal turned to physical? And then is it become dangerous, right? Or do you feel unsafe? And a lot of times I have families who say, well, it's only happened once that they woke up in the middle of the night and they put their fingers around my throat. It's only happened once that they've pinched me or punched me. No, this could continue happening. And it's oftentimes because it's normal. The family members don't have the skills to be able to properly communicate or deflect these false beliefs. Okay, so we want to be careful with that. In order to minimize stress or understand what's going on, again, imagine the disease is evolving, the person loses their communication skills, they can't express how they're feeling. First of all, what's really important is to understand the person that you're caring for. What are their triggers? What makes them happy? What makes them unhappy, right? What type of music do they like? What type of music do they not like? Maybe they're too hot, maybe they're too cold, maybe they've been sitting all day in a chair, maybe they're wet. You have to almost become a detective and figure out what is triggering a certain behavior. Number two, it's about letting go of the small step, okay? If the person is walking around the house like in the cold winter and they're changing their clothes 5 times a day or setting the table the wrong way, who cares? Right? Too much time family members spend time going, you're not doing this right. Why are you setting the table this way? Why are you wearing the clothes this way? Why are you doing that? They have dementia, okay? So it's about letting go of what they are doing or what they are saying isn't hurting anybody. Let them be, okay? And then I also talk about using a bit of the compassionate line. So if the information that you're going to tell them has the possibility of causing a traumatic experience, why do it? So an example would be, my father passed away 10 years before, and if all of a sudden my mother says, where's your father? And I say, well, he's dead. And she's going to have, why do that? Why not say, oh, remember Dad went back to Egypt, he went on a big trip, okay? Or how come my car, you have to take the keys away? Well, you don't have to tell the person, oh, because, you've got dementia and you can't drive anymore. You could say, oh, don't you remember there's a recall on the car and they're looking into it. There's some moments where if the information is going to cause them pain, think twice before following that. So we want to also really be concerned about safety for the person. And the dementia not only has an impact on the cognition or the activities of daily living, but it has an impact on a person's mobility. You'll notice that a person starts to shuffle when they walk, has an impact on their vision. There's risks of falls. And what we don't want to have, unfortunately, falls do become at some point almost inevitable, right? But we want to try to keep them as safe as possible. In this Dementia Companion Guide, which is available for free on McGill, you can download it for free, and printed copies will be available at Seniors Action Quebec. We take the time to go through all the rooms in the house to make sure that you safe-proof as much as possible, right? You think about if you want to safe-proof a person from falling, just like ourselves, be mindful of cords, be mindful of loose carpeting. Are your stairs carpeted, right? What about in the bathroom, right? Is there any risk of falls in the bathroom? So one of the most dangerous rooms in the house for a person living with dementia is what we call the medicine cabinet, right? And this was a picture of a woman that I had done as a safety assessment with a couple of years ago. A lot of frustration from family members is they say, oh, my mother, father isn't taking their medications. Person who has dementia should not be left unsupervised. They need to be presented with their medication or have a professional caregiver give them medication. Because if they're left on their own, they could be overdosing, taking the wrong medication, forgetting to take their medication, brushing their teeth with polysporin or cortisone cream. Right? So you have to really pay attention to the medicine cabinet, whether that's in the kitchen, the bedroom, or the bathroom. So also we hear every week in the news about a person wandering, right? Wandering out of their own residence, wandering out of their home. And wandering happens, and I met a woman this week and I said, does your husband get up at night? Oh, well, just occasionally, and then he comes into my room, and then, or so he'll leave the apartment and walk down the hallway. Once they start doing that, okay, it will continue. So we want to make sure a person is as safe as possible. I recommend to the families that I'm working with that they use the Apple AirTag, okay? Normally a person, when they go out, they always bring their purse or the same coat. AirTag could be useful if the person is still driving, right? But the AirTag allows you to quickly locate where the person has gone to, okay? And also when it comes to driving, I mean, the dementia has an impact on a person's ability to have their reflexes, recognize red light, yellow light, green light, right? Hit the parking, hit the gas instead of the brake. So this type of issue, you really need to work with a medical doctor because it should be the medical doctor who helps the family decide when it's time to stop driving. Then when we talk about safety, today there is so many scams out there, right? The number one stress for family members when it comes to dementia is oftentimes finances because it's expensive. It's expensive to care for a person. So we want to be able to protect the person's finances. And when you're healthy, you think before you act, you think before you speak. But I don't know about you, but I get all these emails from my bank, so-called, the RCMP that wants to arrest me, Amazon. I mean, this is a whole talk in itself. But finances are the number one priority. And oftentimes the early signs of dementia often begin with a person making financial errors, forgetting to pay bills, paying too much, right? Impulsive use of their credit card, going to the bank and using the debit card multiple times a day, giving the money out to different people. So this is a talk just in itself. So we really want to protect the person's finances. And once again, the importance of having a doctor that is evaluating the person living with dementia is at a certain point, the family member is going to want to have a mandate, okay? To be able, or a power of attorney, to be able to protect the person's finances, to make sure that they don't make those mistakes. But you have to work in collaboration with a medical doctor. And I don't know if Andrew's going to go through a little bit about this, but it's really important to keep an eye on the accounts. Because if the person makes a mistake in terms of sending a check for $500 or $5,000, and I'm the daughter and realizing my mom made a mistake, I can't go to the bank and say, oh, well, I think she's got some memory issues. Can I get her money back? It's like, no. If I don't have my name and I'm not responsible for the account, there's no getting the money back. So we really want to protect the person's finances. One of the stresses that often happens too is that, again, the disease begins with all these cognitive changes, but before you know it, you've got sometimes an older person caring for an older person. By the time the disease has reached its middle stage, you're now realizing, my God, I have to help my husband or wife get dressed. I have to help them go to the bathroom. I have to help them shower. They now need help with their meals. They're having more difficulty walking, right? So this is often a sign where you say, I need some help here. Whether that's going and getting some home care support, because nobody wants to transition right away into a long-term care. But there's a lot of great good home care agencies, such as like Andrew, what he does, and to help with this, right? But if you refuse to get help, or the person refuses to get help, this is when burnout happens, right? Because it's just becomes too much physical work. Because by the time the disease has progressed into its evolution, you need 24 hours, 7 days a week help with the physical care. At some point, you've tried to get home care. This causes also tremendous amount of stress. As you said, my mother, father, husband, wife made me swear that I would never, ever, ever transition them to long-term care. But those are very difficult promises to make. Because if at some point you've done everything that you can to try to keep the person at home as long as possible, maybe there's no choice. Maybe the spouse has passed away before the person living with dementia. The grown-up kids have their lives, right? So it's important to realize that you do your best, but sometimes there's no choice, and you need to transition. But I have to say that this is probably one of the decisions that causes also the most stress on families. Okay, so navigating the healthcare system is so important, right? Right now, the waiting list in Quebec is about 2 years to go into a siège facility. just to get in touch with a CLSC social worker, depending on the region that you live, could take up to 6 months. So understanding how to navigate the system is of paramount importance, and having a good social worker with you, it will be key. This is an example of, how I had to navigate. I mean, my mother in 2012 was in a residence. It was not going well. She was not safe. She was not happy. She was not clean. Okay. I had no idea how to navigate the system. And once I finally figured it out, I was able to get her out of that place and into the next residence, where you could see the difference, right? You could see how in 3 months, so she got out of the last one in June and 3 years later. But that takes so much time and effort, right? Managing 3 kids. I had another career at the time, but that's what my number one priority was, and that's what really advocating is all about. So it puts a lot of pressure on families. If it's a spouse caring for a spouse, it's hard because once upon a time you had this romantic relationship, or the communication at dinner time is no longer there, or it's difficult. And, it's a role reversal. So, once upon a time, my mother cared for me, and now I have to care for her. So once again, it's about recognizing those boundaries, right? Like, what can I do? Like, and that's also a signal that maybe I need some professional care at home when it comes time to changing and bathing, and the person's becoming more incontinent, right? And so to recognize, where are your boundaries as a caregiver? When we talk about burnout, especially as women, we all believe that we're superwomen, right? So I always say, once upon a time, I believe I wore a cape, right? I wanted everybody to believe that I had everything under control when I really didn't. So one of my first signs that I was burning out, well, I mean, there were many signs, but I would say when I work with families right now, the number one sign is anger. I'm feeling angry all the time. I feel like my loved one is a burden. I resent this. I don't want to be in this position. And anger often comes from a place of not being educated, not understanding the disease. Sometimes you're caring for somebody that you don't like. Sometimes you're fighting with your brothers and sisters, right? You're stressed because of the finances. You're stressed because I don't understand this disease. You're stressed because I don't want to do this, right? I have 3 young kids. I don't want to do this. So just want to say that anger is probably the strongest emotion that I hear from most people. Next slide, please. And then we just have to be careful, mindful of how we manage our stress. This is kind of like you're in a state of denial. You can't believe this is happening. We feel guilt. We're grieving the person while they're still alive. You feel stigma, you feel isolated. You have the anger, and then it's how you deal. So some people drink too much, smoke too much, take Ativan, shop too much, eat too much, or combine all of them, right? And you have to be careful because a lot of these coping mechanisms could become addictions, right? Like I was drinking at 1.2 bottles of wine a day just to manage my stress, going to bed feeling absolute shame, but what do? You start the day over again, right? So it's like this vicious cycle that happens over and over again. So you have to be mindful. So in order to avoid burnout, again, become as educated as possible, identify all the organizations that could support you. If not, the longer you wait, the harder it will become to implement some support. Please know that the person living with dementia, the majority of the time will say, I don't want any help at home. Andrew probably deals with this all the time. I don't want anybody to help. But the help is not there necessarily only for the person. The help is there for the caregiver. You have to have the help. It is absolutely imperative that you have the help. COVID taught us that in life we have a plan A and we need a plan B. If you do not get the support that you need, you will not be able to provide the best quality of care for that person. It's impossible. So even if the person is refusing help, you must get it in there, because I promise you they will adapt. They do. They will adapt. Okay? As long as you find the right companion for them, they really will adapt. So set boundaries for yourself. When I suffered a severe burnout in 2011, and in order to recover, I had to really take stock and do a triage of my life. Who were the people that were maybe bringing me down? What were the commitments that I was involved with that I didn't want to do anymore? My mother passed away in 2016. To this day, every time I'm invited to a dinner party, a lunch, to talk at an event, I always ask myself, how will this serve me? Okay, is this in line with me and what I want to do, or will it not? And there's certain people in your life, like family members, that you may have to get together with, but perhaps choose lunch instead of dinner. Lunch is short. It's an hour or an hour and a half. Dinners are 3-4 hours, right? So at the end of the day, it's about taking care of yourself. And it's okay to say no, right? Who cares? Right? But it's about really setting limits. So lastly, I'm just going to quickly tell you about the resources we've developed at McGill. So you could sign up, if you go to mcgill.ca/dementia, you sign up for our newsletter, and there you'll always be updated about all the upcoming programs. So we've developed all kinds of free resources that are there for you to access on demand and support you. We've got an amazing series of video modules that are going to be launched. So if you sign up to the website, it's the video modules were filmed by Quebec actors in English and French, and we are really dealing with some of the most challenging situations that people deal with. There'll be 7 of them on different topics, so please stay tuned for these video modules, which will be unbelievable. We've just launched a new program called Caring Spaces, so we're going to be working in the hospitals in the Division of Geriatric Medicine to support patients and caregivers upon receiving a diagnosis. It's currently in development, but it's really going to give the McGill University students an opportunity to be there with the patients and the caregivers, so that hopefully nobody gets the good luck and has to leave the office. So you could follow us on social media as well. Again, this guidebook, Ruth has got a few extra copies. On the website, you could download it for free. Copies are available at Amazon for $20. They support our program. It's available in 14 languages because dementia doesn't discriminate. So it's important that we've developed 14 languages. And I'm proud to say the World Health Organization has just recognized this as a very important resource. So we're very proud of this work. And thank you very much. I hope I stayed in my time.
So I'm Joanne, and I'm living exactly what you're talking about. An additional challenge I had was that my husband was put into a CHSLD that's completely French speaking. And I begged and asked that he be put on, a waiting list, because on top of not being able to communicate every day just to say hi or to have a boo-boo or a bed sore, he couldn't communicate at all, which put all the pressure on me to be there every day, most of the day, translate. So what's being done about that? Because I did write a letter. I tried to say, you don't have to become English. I even offered to work there and provide English speaking chat with the English-speaking residents in downtown Montreal in this CHSLD. And so, yeah, and my family and friends are, don't go every day. Well, if I don't go every day, he can't communicate. And he's at stage 1, I would say, of Alzheimer's. He can communicate. So, and he knows where he is and he knows what's, so that's a big challenge for the English-speaking senior community, anyway, I would say.
Well, I'm sorry that, yeah.
Important piece to
Yeah,
add to the
yeah.
woman's story is her husband is Polish. Polish? No.
Serbian.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
But, French is a third language.
Right. Yeah. So anyway,
Okay.
and
The only thing I would say to you at this point, is go to the media with that story. Because honestly, that is really unfortunate that that's happened. And I would say go to the media. Because at this point, with what's going on in our healthcare system, you've tried, and I know how hard it is to advocate, but call the CBC or call CTV, get that on the media. And that'll hopefully make a change, because that's not
scared
fair.
of repercussions.
No, there's no repercussions. It's not fair for him to be taken. I had the same issue because my mother was speaking Finnish and they wanted to send her to Hochelaga Maisonneuve, and I said no, because she can't be in French only.
Right.
So they respected that. But the fact that they're not respecting your wishes, and I'm hoping, there. Could you get a little bit of support that you don't have to go every day? Is that possible?
Not at the moment.
No, okay.
No,
Well, the only thing I would say, if that was me, I would say go to the media with your story and see if they could help you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
I have just one very brief question, and then we'll move on. If someone has received a diagnosis and they have somebody in their family who has the mandate as a liquidator, taking care of their health matters, or even if not, because you say there's waiting lists, can they put themselves on a waiting list in advance that, maybe in 2-3 years when they
needed?
Well, that's the important role of working with a social worker from the city. The only way to get into the public system is via the CLSC and a social worker, and it would have to be the social worker that would guide you. The priority is always given to people according to their health needs, according to their number of hours they require. Yeah, I know it's almost like comparing to a daycare, right? Like where you get pregnant, put on a list. Doesn't really work that way anymore because there's so many people waiting. But you could be if the social worker evaluates that it looks like you're heading that way within the year, they may make that decision for you. But you can't just go on a waiting list for yeah.
Well, Claire, I thank you ever so much, and we can see the great need that there is to have people like you. I compliment you for all your work. Keep it up, and we really appreciate it. So thank you.